Okay, we'll call the order, the organizational meeting and special city council meeting for Wednesday, January 3rd. First item on the agenda, organizational appointments. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at the 2020, had a look at them. Let's just take them one to work our way down if we could, because we need to make a motion for each one, correct? Okay, so city appointments, number one. Does anybody have any questions about that? Pretty straightforward. If not, then I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the 2024 city appointments as presented.
I'll second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. City council liaison appointments. You've all had hopefully everybody's had a chance to look over these, questions, comments, any issues, anybody have anything?
They didn't switch up.
No.
Is there a reason for that? You know, last year when I got on, that was one of the main things that I brought up. How do we do this? How does it switch up? What's a variety? Just after being on a year, hearing some of the feedback from staff, different things, I think that some of these should switch.
Okay, which ones in particular?
I think that, you know, being on personnel committee, I think that's one that people should switch up on. I also think, you know, just maybe between department heads, I don't know. Just, I know some people have been a long time in one area, but just to move around, get a different flavor. But that's just the feedback that I've gotten. And once again, you know, if we're here in year number 2 and nothing's changing or switching, what's the process and why is this the process? Again, question from a year ago.
Yeah.
Mayor Ryan, if you wanted to mention about negotiations committee and police
Yeah.
changes. I
The
mean,
police
just for a
department
couple.
did change, their liaison did change, and then there's also a, is that on a separate one or is it on this one? No, it's on this one. Negotiation committee. We broke the negotiation committee away from the personnel committee. So the personnel committee normally did negotiations and stuff as
Right.
well. We broke that away from there, and so we added, Mr. Zahn or Councilman Zahn to the negotiating committee, and then I kept myself on the negotiating committee as mayor. That was a change as well. Leaving planning and zoning as it is, that was something that it's working, and we got a lot of stuff coming up, and I couldn't see any reason to change the planning and zoning liaison from where it's currently at. Also, I think people need to realize that all of these meetings, anything, I mean, people can go to these and participate in them from an audience standpoint as well. So we're not stopping any other council members from going to these, but with respect to the personnel committee, what's the major, I guess, what was the major? I have not heard anything from, I mean, nothing has come to me personally. Jenny?
I just thought it would be helpful that, to share that I have had conversations with both Mayor Ryan and Councilmember Utzinger about, engaging with staff and maybe making themselves available throughout the year, to hear feedback and just have conversations and try to engage and have a more back and forth. I know Councilmember Utzinger suggested maybe that you do that quarterly or figure out here early in the year what that looked like, but you both seemed open to that, I think, to kind of get back to the, how do we bridge, you know, better communication and work through that. So I think that's, you know, something to consider, and you both were receptive to that to help maybe make some steps forward. So I just offer that as conversations that were had.
Yeah, that's fine. You know, just to be blunt, it still doesn't answer my question. The question is, when do we change? How does that process work? You know, the couple little changes are minor, but nothing's happened. You know, there wasn't really an answer a year ago for this question, and there doesn't appear to be an answer tonight.
I
And I just-
personally don't see a reason to change the personnel committee.
Okay. What about any of the other stuff? I guess I'm just wondering, you know, everyone else is booked up with 3, 4, 5 things, you know, and I have one, and I just, you know,
Well, what else, what other position would be something that people want to look at? Switching.
so why don't you want to change the personnel committee?
I don't think the personnel committee has done a bad job. I think the biggest problem with the personnel committee has been on behalf of, but as far as employees go, there are a handful of employees who have had issues with the personnel committee that are, and some of the things that I, can't say I heard it from them because nobody came to me and said it. But, from what I understand is that they don't think the personnel committee listens to anything that they had to say. That stemmed from a conversation couple of years ago. I disagree. We took the feedback that was given to us and we implemented that, which we found credible, and some of it was not credible. And those are a call that has to be made. And if that's upsetting to somebody, we ended up making the call. That doesn't mean that the personnel committee has to change. The mayor typically is on the personnel committee. That's pretty much been a historical thing in the city of Nisswa. And looking at the fact that we have unions that we are negotiating with, 3 now, I personally feel that if you have some knowledge of union work, that's important to have in there, especially when we're going to be looking at negotiating contracts and things of that nature. It's a whole different ballgame necessary. It's not the same as non-union positions.
Sure,
Those are
and so
things that
you've-
I take into
So you've
consideration.
broke that portion out and formed another committee just for the negotiations.
Just for the negotiations
Right,
here.
yeah, and
But on the
that's-
personnel committee, the people that have been on it, have considerable experience working with, unions and personnel matters. Just, from a experience standpoint. But,
Yeah, and I mean, I just think, you know, that with the feedback that we've got from staff, especially recently, it speaks to the exact opposite of that. Like you said yourself, putting words in your mouth, you know, not putting different words in your own mouth, that the staff has felt like the personnel committee has not listened to them. And that is the current feedback that I've
In what
currently
way?
got from the staff.
In what way?
We'd have to let the staff speak for that, but
Well-
I think it's probably the biggest underlying issue that we have facing this year going into the city, improving talks, negotiations, and communication with staff.
And that's one
And-
thing that Jenny just outlined, that the plan to do that, yeah. And that has happened in the past too. I think that both sides need to be open to communicate. Whether they like what they hear or not isn't relevant. They need to be able to openly communicate and work through those things. But
So I guess, can you tell me what the exact plan is for that again? How is that gonna change this year?
we're looking at, I believe we were talking about having sessions where either myself or Councilman Uthinger would be at City Hall, make ourselves available. If people want to bring up items, if they want to bring up things to us,
And that's gonna be scheduled monthly or when?
we don't know yet. It might be bi-monthly, it might be monthly, it might be quarterly, it might be, also, there's one thing staff better really pick up on. They don't have to wait for there to be a problem to reach out and communicate with the personnel committee.
No, I just think on our end, you know, sitting up here, that we gotta be the leaders, you know?
Well,
If
I
there's
just
a,
said,
if there's a
I
meeting
just
scheduled.
said, we're looking at putting that together and getting that out there. Based on the 8 years that I've been on the council, starting my 8th year now, there hasn't been a lot of willingness by staff to reach out and want to save much. And when they do, just because something doesn't happen the way they think it should happen, doesn't mean it isn't looked at, it isn't processed, and it isn't worked on, and it isn't looked at. And I know from for a fact that a couple of the things, the main item that was items that were brought up to myself and Councilman Usinger a couple of years ago were extensively and exhaustively dealt with the city administrator and stuff, and we figured out ways around things and how can we make this work better. So I have to disagree if staff says we don't listen to them, because we do. But
So back to my original question, you know, from this year and from a year ago that I brought up, there's no rhyme or reason to how these committees are formed. There's no function, you know, in the 8 years you've been on here. It's just, this is whatever the mayor thinks and people go with it. There's no rhyme or reason or a term limit on anything that we can do or set. It just seems like it could be very dictative and handpicked on what we want people to do depending upon where it is. And I guess, you know, in a year from going back, you know, my original question a year ago till now, that's why I asked that last year, so we won't be sitting here this year and just having the exact same assignments, because now for some of these roles, nothing's changed for 3 or 4 years and one person's just pigeonholed in one area. And I'm just saying, you know, is that the best thing for all of us to have a knowledge on all the different departments going on in the city function and stuff, just to stay in one spot for 3 or 4 years without moving around, getting to know the different department heads better, being on different councils. Everybody up here has different strengths and weaknesses. I don't disagree that with Jesse's background that he should be in the negotiation committee with the union. I think that's a smart thing, but also too, switching stuff around, whether it be public works, police, fire, you know, parks and rec, you know, I don't know that it hurts to have us switch around so we all gain more knowledge and insight in different areas. And I'm just, once again, asking, what's the process for that? If it's not for us here now, fine. But going ahead, when new council comes in, I would like to see a different process than currently what's happening happen.
well, there's also council members, you know, reach out, what are they interested in doing? That's another thing. Obviously, you're not satisfied with where you're at, Joe. What would you like to do? What else would you like to be assigned to do?
Well, I'd like to be on the personnel committee, I
Okay.
guess. You know, I reached out to you a week ago and talked to you about that. When I called you on the phone. I can look it up, tell you the date and the time.
You didn't ask to be on the personnel committee at that time. That's not what you said.
I sure did, but I guess
Well,
I'll
you
have to email it next time.
You didn't.
But that's neither
the
here
point-
nor there. I'm just wondering this process, you know, want to talk about, that's what tonight is, to talk about and discuss. And I guess I brought it up a year ago when I got on here and here we are a year later. You know, I'm looking and willing to have other feedback, but you know, for future councils and stuff, how is this determined? What's it doing? You know, there's, you know, Jesse's on 5 things that maybe take up a tremendous amount. You know, if you look at time, what the time takes in Jesse's time versus my time in a month, I have 1/50th of the time that Jesse's gonna have by taking it up. And if Jesse wants that, that's fine. I'm just saying it's not even balanced as far as the time commitment that we have. It's lopsided.
Maybe if I might
Right.
say something here is that when I was first elected into the council, I came from a background of working in a factory, and I had to deal with a lot of legal, as well as director of HR as well. So just simply having that background, and at that time, I just said I'd be willing to do something like this. And I think there was a consensus at the time that I would be a good fit for that. You know, I had that the qualifications for it. And so it's just continued since then. So I don't know how, you know, it would change maybe if I'm not around anymore, or if someone really has the qualifications and wants to be on there. I have no objections to it as well. You know?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just asking, you know, how is this determined? What are the qualifications? You know, it's like kind of putting numbers in a hat and drawing right now, but what are the qualifications? What are we saying? What are we doing?
I don't think it was draw something from the hat for in my case, when we first started here. So, and it's just sort of continuation of it right now and this is will be my fourth year. So, that's basically how I believe that I was put onto that committee. It wasn't me that decided to get on the committee. It was just the consensus afterwards.
And then how many
I
years
think
have you been on it?
It's 3 years now.
3 years?
And I'll
Right.
be one more year at
So-
least.
4 years in a row.
Yeah.
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 It would be
So I'm
4
just-
years in a row, right?
There's also something to think about too, is when you have your experience, when you have
Yep.
experience and stuff, you don't want to just get rid of it, change it for the sake of changing. Okay. Again, the history and understanding from the negotiations to the personnel committee issues that have taken place, the things that we've done, et cetera. It's nice to be able to lean back on that history, as well as, tap into people's abilities that they have. The liquor department, it's one thing. I took into account your availability during the summer months or during different times of years with your running your own business, et cetera. It was always my understanding that it was difficult to just break away and get away. Are you saying that's not an issue anymore?
Well, it's not breakaway or getaway, all the meetings are scheduled and stuff. All I'm saying is, we have one person for 4 years of knowledge, like on one committee, what's the overlap? What's the next thing, If you go away, there's 4 years that went away with you and there's nobody else that has had any insight in anything for 4 years. And
Well, is there any way that maybe Joe could sit in on the personnel committee to just see how it works? Or is that not?
No, because then it creates a quorum.
Quorum.
Oh, that's right.
Right. And I guess I'm just using this as an example, on, having good knowledge, across the board, across the way, once again, I just think it's something that needs to be looked at, how this has gone about, what it's done, what the feedback is from staff on different areas. All of that needs to come into play when we're looking at all the different committees, whether it be public works or parks or whatever.
No,
So, yeah. Like the parks, Mark, how long have you been on the parks one also? Is it the same amount of time?
Mhm.
4 years?
Well, three, this will be the fourth, but,
It'll be the
but
fourth.
see, I was
Right.
just gonna drag Amber into this if she doesn't mind.
Sure.
But, so as the department head, would you want to see every other year or every year having a change of liaison? Do you want consistency? Or when you're working through stuff, would a department head rather have the same liaison? Or if let's say you don't want me as the liaison, I'm just gonna put that out there. Would you be comfortable in going to Jenny and the mayor and saying, hey, I want to change?
I think every department has its own nuances. So in parks and public works, some of these things are multi-year projects, and sometimes that's nice to have the longevity. But to Joe's point, like, is there like a succession planning type of
Right.
scenario? Obviously, we come to meetings, we submit department reports, we're always available for questions to all council members. And so in part, there's some, in different departments, some of that longevity and that knowledge and that history is beneficial. But everybody has a term limit, and how do you gain that knowledge through the process? I think in other departments, it might be beneficial to have more rotation and more understanding. They don't have some of these like multi-year projects that other departments have. So I think coming into it, my perspective, the department needs personalities, knowledge, all of those I think probably play a role And at the end of the day, if something's not jiving for the council member or the department head, it needs to be stated. And if that process is through the personnel committee or city administrator, or it needs to be brought up ahead of time, if there is a concern or an issue. And so I think there's pros and cons to it. And I think it is dependent on department and personality of department head. So I think there's nuances within it.
Something that we used to do a little bit more that we got away from, but certainly could consider getting back to is the pro tem role. We've kept that in place with the liquor department because there's 2 departments and that can be a lot depending on what's going on. But maybe that's something to consider is for that succession planning and ensuring you've got redundancy is the pro tem role. It's trying to be mindful of council's time. And the more things you have listed potentially feels a little more burdensome and that kind of thing, but that's certainly something to consider as well. Maybe even for some of these departments who have big projects like Amber mentioned, that might be helpful. So,
I was pro tem under former council member Jacobson for planning and zoning, I think, for 8 months. Intricate department,
Mhm.
very, very detail orientated, and it took a while, I think, to be able to get understanding of the code and the ordinance and the changes of the ordinance, especially with what's been done now. So I think a pro tem approach is good. Also, I mean, for consistency purposes of like having a 4-year seat, we haven't always had that. I feel I was appointed after resignation of a council member, and he had, I think, just 8 months left on his term, right? Joe got a 2-year seat. If all things hold, nobody resigns off the council, we're gonna get back on a pretty consistent 4-year cycle for everybody. I think both you two are up for election.
26.
26?
I'm up
That's right. Yeah, you're
24.
up, and then your seat's up as well, so I think that, and obviously,
And
Mayor. So, perhaps,
I'm just
one-
looking for long-term succession, how we're doing this, how there's overlap, how there's communication just being on for a year. It's like, well, that happened 3 years ago and this council member knows it, but nobody else knows it, or that council member left. And even when I got on with the liquor committee, some of the questions I asked. What are the projects going on? Where's the packet of information from the last guy? How is that being tracked and handed off to the next person? It doesn't exist right now and it's not happening. And with this process, I think that's huge to have because, it's taken a year to get up to speed with the liquor committee where it's like, if this is written down, recorded, copied, how often do we meet? What's the time commitment? What are the big projects? None of that information, even here going into this year, I don't know that we have all that in front of us for each area.
One idea I might have is that, and if you're willing to do this, the Public Works Committee, I'm the only council member on there. And that might be something that you might want to join in the committee to be part of it. And you get used to it, learning about what's going on in the Public Works area for possible future.
Yeah, and I guess that would be one, prior step back a little bit in Public Works and talking about that. That would be actually a spot where I'd recommend having 2 council members on and just getting rid of that whole committee. I mean, being here for a year and looking at the way that operated with the recycling and everything, I would say that would be assigned 2 council members just to meet with the head of Public Works and get rid of the whole committee. And that would be more effective for us. And it's the way that it had been done up until, the prior mayor had changed that. And the feedback from Public Works on that is that would be more efficient to actually assign 2 council to the Public Works and get rid of the committee. And those are things too that I think that we need to discuss, are we just having meetings and committees and what does that really do and how does that help the city? So, and like I say, that's direct feedback that I've got from Public Works. So, yeah, I don't agree that that'd be a bad idea, but I'd say let's get rid of the committee and assign two
Personally,
councils.
I've liked the background and the information from the people on the committee. They have perspectives that I might not have. That the two of us, let's say if we were doing something, we have a certain perspective, but it's better to have that perspective as well. Because it reflects more of what the community wants. And then when they come in, when we've had difficult discussions, it's been very helpful to have them along. And I don't, that is one way of doing it, to have just two council members, but I personally like to have the committee helping with their ideas and their perspectives along with any type of issues that come along. think
Yeah,
it's a
I
good
guess it's
idea.
just something to evaluate, and like I say, that
Mhm.
that was formed from a prior mayor and something, and I just look at it now being here a year and looking at what I would see as some inefficiencies with that versus efficiencies, but I understand that perspective too, but I just,
But I think as an idea, since you only have the liquor committee, if you want to learn something else or have that experience with something else, to maybe join another committee, and the Public Works Committee is just the one council member right now. I believe in planning and zoning, there's two, right?
No, it's just one.
It's just the one, okay. So something like that, or in Public Works.
and like I say, I'm just addressing some issues that department heads and staff have brought to me that I feel need to be addressed at this time with how we're doing this, how we're putting together the committees, the council, what we're doing, what we might change this year going ahead. And it, maybe tonight's not the time, but maybe we need to get in further discussion, like Public Works being one, on this, but it's just, when I got on, I was encouraged to go and talk to every department head, which I've done.
Mhm.
And that's what I did. And that is the feedback that I have got from all the department heads and staff is like, hey, let's figure out different strengths, weaknesses of the people. How is it switching around? Public Works,
So
things
what do
like
we-
that. I'm just bringing the feedback
Yeah.
back.
So in the interest of moving this forward tonight, what do we do with this now? Do we approve this and take a look at what else we would like to, would you like to work with Councilman Utzinger on the Public Works Committee?
Yeah, I have no issue
Okay.
working on that. I just, and
It
don't
does
get me
take,
wrong, I'm not bringing this up for myself to get on more roles or certain roles or need more of a position. I'm looking at this as we need to change the way that this is working and operating as a whole, moving ahead towards the future, because the feedback that I've gotten from the staff is that this whole system could be improved on. And that's, I guess, what I'm trying to relay.
Last thing I will say about the Personnel Committee is, the Personnel Committee deals with some sensitive information from time to time, extremely sensitive. And there's certain rules and regulations and how things operate. Councils don't always understand that. We have certain rights as a council member. As council members, we hire, we fire, and we promote. That's it. Sometimes things by staff are brought to the attention of council members that, legally speaking, they cannot be shared with. They shouldn't be shared with council members. There's a process for it. Staff's very well aware of what that process is. For the most part, everyone follows it, but it hasn't always been the case. And so it's very, very, you gotta walk a very thin line sometimes, and you gotta know what you can and can't do. And you gotta be willing to accept that. You don't get to do it the way you want to do it necessarily, or way you think it should be done, or the way it might be done in private business is completely different. So Personnel Committee stuff does take, there's a learning curve there.
So are you saying I can't learn that, or why did you just give me all that information? I guess, where are you going with that?
I'm saying that there isn't always, staff doesn't always understand what the Personnel Committee does. And when they have brought stuff to us in the past, period, they've been wrong. And it's been addressed, it's been brought up, and that they're telling us that the Personnel Committee is ineffective and needs to change. They're telling you that. They're not telling me that. They're not telling, I don't know if any of the other council members have heard it either. but I'm finding that out tonight, that they're telling you that, then we can definitely sit down and take a look and work with staff on a, you know, a communicative level, like the city administrator said. But, if we're gonna do that, then everyone has to understand there's certain ways that has to be done. There are legalities and things when it comes to labor law and things of that nature, and you gotta be willing to dig into it and understand it. You don't have to like it. It's all kind of convoluted sometimes, but it's what it is. So, but I don't see a reason to change the personnel committee at this time. I did agree with, I like the negotiating committee aspect. And that could be a place where perhaps in the future, council members could get their feet wet and start learning how that all works. When you're negotiating with unions and negotiating with the various labor laws as it pertains to public entities versus private entities. So, okay.
Yeah, I guess that's fine. I guess what I would like to see is, some further discussion at a later time on the committees, for instance, the negotiating committee that was created. Was that something that we all voted on?
No, it was something that myself and the city administrator were discussing. The fact of the matter is there's only 2 council members, period, that will be here next January 1st. That is guaranteed. And that's Jesse and Mark Fraley.
Yep.
And that's why we thought it would be advantageous to bring Jesse in on the ground floor with the negotiating stuff and the union stuff, which he does have experience with.
Sure.
Along with myself, but based on my experiences. So that's why we did that, was to break that up.
And
No, and that's fine. It just seems like there's a lot of background discussion with that going on because the negotiating committee getting created, formed and appointed, without all of us even knowing that that's taking place and occurring.
This is your
Outside-
opportunity to agree to it or not agree to it.
Well, outside of a meeting, I just wonder
ahead.
how all this talk is getting done.
it is important to ensure that I did look at our ordinances as far as committees, creation of committees and structures, thinking about the Gull Lake Trail Committee as an example. And certainly because the negotiations committee isn't something that's starting tomorrow or anytime soon, we will ensure that if there are formal approvals that are needed, that we'll take those steps, because that is important. I think it was to as kind of kickstart that idea tonight and to say we need to make sure that if there are any requirements that we do that. I don't know how formal or not formal, like the Gull Lake Trail Committee example was, for example, was created, but conceptually that was kind of the point for tonight. But we'll make sure that that's all legitimate.
Yeah,
If you don't
and
want-
I
If you
get
don't
that-
want
my
a
question.
negotiating committee, this is a chance to vote against it. So.
I guess this is, the first time that I'm learning of it, but it's what I'm understanding tonight is it's already been created and it's obviously been assigned. So what I'm saying is.
Nothing's been assigned yet because this hasn't been approved.
And to actually be transparent with you
Right.
too, from my perspective, John can verify this and Jenny heard it. I just asked him, about the personnel committee, it's staying the same before the meeting started. And when I got the packet via email, when I was in Florida, I saw that there's a negotiation committee. I did not ask them either questions. He just gave me the quick 411 as to why. And he understands that I have a background in dealing with the IBEW and union negotiations from my side. So I just learned of it more or less at the same time as you did.
Sure, and so that, basically my question is, how do these committees get formed like this? You're learning of it. I don't disagree that you should be the person on the committee. I'm just wondering, all of a sudden we formed another committee. And now 2 of us don't exactly know
Well,
the background information on how that got formed until it's kind of formed and it's up to vote on tonight,
to be additionally further transparent, if I was to have ran for mayor and to be elected mayor, a year ago,
Right.
a couple months ago, I would have been able to be the one to make the decisions ultimately, even outside of Jenny's council or any of the other council members' council to decide who I think is gonna be best suited for a certain position. And it's ultimately John's discretion to be able to choose that, such as the president choosing who his cabinet members are gonna be in
Sure.
the Oval Office. So
So is that how committees get formed? The mayor forms all the committees? Is that?
The
is
mayor
that
appoints liaisons to the committees.
No, but how do the committees themselves get formed?
well, the committees are established and then essentially there are, it goes out to the public to be able to post a opening on a committee, just as I saw for public or for, planning and zoning, November or October of 2021. I think that was the year. And I applied for it. I was interviewed by, it wasn't even
Right.
Bethany at that time. It was Brittany and then the chair. I was interviewed and then it was debated amongst the committee to approve me being on the planning and zoning commission.
Right.
And then the vacancy came up for council. I applied for that as well. Actually, Don Jacobson said, my first council meeting up here, you sure got yourself weaseled in here pretty quick. And, essentially that's the root of it. So if there's a desire to, just to summarize, I think I get where both of you are coming from. If you want to be on a specific one, I think it's worthwhile to make a formal request right now and just be blunt with it. And then,
No, I guess my question specifically right now is the committee, the negotiating committee was formed by John.
Well,
The mayor?
we could scratch it.
No, I'm just asking a question.
Was
Or
is
are
there,
are
in
we
the
looking-
interest of getting done sometime tonight on this, is there an issue with the negotiating committee? It was a decision that we came up with that in talking with Jenny about it so that we had some consistency. Should Jesse and Mark be the only two following up on the next council that'll be here, so that there's some consistency there, there's some background there for Jesse in this case and whatnot. If there's an issue with that, we can scrub it, put it on a council meeting and do it that way. That's fine. But as mayor, it's my understanding that I have the authority to be able to appoint this in this fashion, but it has to be approved by the council then, which is why we're here tonight. That's why I'm doing that. So if that's a problem, we can do that.
You're missing my point. There is no
Well-
problem with the negotiating committee. Are you looking at forming other committees that are currently not on this list? Are
No.
we looking at breaking
There's
off any?
there's nothing else on this list that if there was something else coming up, Joe, it would be on this list.
Okay.
Okay?
Are we?
Will
looking-
there be a point in time where something else will be broken away from another committee in a subcommittee form? That's very possible. That's usually what the council decides to do on a given project. But that's a council decision to have to do it. Otherwise, the committee will just handle it, whichever committee it falls under.
Okay,
Subcommittees
so-
are broken out, as per projects generally.
Okay, so if we wanted to talk about getting rid of the Public Works Committee, is that tonight's discussion to talk about?
No.
Or
No.
does that require,
That's gonna for
a
me, that's
motion?
gonna require somebody from Public Works, Tom Blommer,
No,
come here and explain to us why he would want to eliminate that. Because evidently that's something he's discussed with you,
well, it was discussed, on our day last February. That
but
was
you've
one of
had
the
further
things he brought
discussions
up.
with him about it, evidently.
He brought it up to all of us on that full day in February at the community center.
Right, but he hasn't spoken to you since then?
No,
about it?
I'm using it as an example,
Okay.
you know,
Well,
So-
but then if that's his desire and if that's something that he feels that is, the best thing for his department, then he should
Sure.
have to bring that forward.
just an example. I'm just, once again, back to my original question. How are we doing this? How is it getting put together? How is all this getting decided? You know,
I think we basically answered that.
so,
I think we have, yeah. So what I would do is amend this to say, put, Councilman Hall on the Public Works Committee. Probably would it be as pro tem?
pro tem.
Would you be willing to do that, Joe?
sure.
Yeah,
I'll
it
do
does take a lot of time, but.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay. So we'd add that to, that. Do we want to scratch the negotiating committee then, or keep it?
let's keep it, yeah.
No, I'm for keeping it. I'm
Okay.
just,
All right. So with those amendments, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion that we approve the 2024 council liaison appointments with the amendment that Joe would be put on to the Public Works as pro tem.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next item is commission committee assignments. Right?
Yes, this just lists each committee and the members. It's
Yep.
a slightly different version than just the council member only list you just had, so.
If there aren't any questions on those, I would entertain a motion to approve.
We will add Councilmember Hall as pro tem for Public Works as well.
Yep. Yep.
Also move.
I'll second.
All further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Commission committee meeting schedule.
We do have an amended version. Apologies, we left the Gully Trail Steering Committee on the list. That will be removed for 24. Otherwise, everything is the same.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the 2024 commission committee meeting schedule.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 2024 rate schedule.
This follows the IRS mileage rate that was set and also the per diem rates that the governmental office for Minneapolis-St. Paul area covers for the year.
And lodging is covered by the city.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to, if it's at time, I'd like to go ahead and we recommend to approve the 2024 rate schedule as presented.
I'll second.
Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
C, agreement between the city of Nisswa and ETOC reference the Pines entrance sign.
We do not have that information yet, so we can strike it, and if needed, it'll be on your next agenda.
I would encourage anyone that has a question about that to get a hold of the city administrator on it. It's pretty straightforward. So, D, city park planning follow-up, council information. Amber.
Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight. We last had a discussion in October, and just to kind of refresh ourselves, we went over the 3D renderings and then kind of broke the park out into different sections. Since then, HKGI generously made us a fly-through video. They had to do some training and they selected our project. And so this was at no cost to us. And I want to show you guys just one as a refresher to what we're talking about. But also we were gifted this. So it does maybe work, maybe not.
Saying no.
It's a different media player than I have on my
Oh,
computer.
here we go.
Oh, yeah, hold on to your seats. So for our benefit, they had to do a training exercise. And so in October, we brought these 3D renderings to you guys. Since then, they've animated it to a certain extent. And there's just various dialogue on a lot of things, some of it being the price point and, you know, the different amenities within the park. So I just want to circle back on some of that. In your packet, one of the biggest things, we've had 2 different studies done. One was the rink feasibility study. The other one has been this parks master plan. Within that, they have both organizations, both companies have analyzed some of the financial components. And we have a significant investment in our park system already. To replace the existing rink is over $1 million. To replace the park system in general is over $7 million. So when we're looking at some of these price tags, they may seem high, but we already have that investment. And so just want to talk through some of this with you guys. Jenny and I met with the Brainerd Lakes Area Community Foundation in November. They're working through the press release and some of that stuff for the Nisswa Enrichment Fund, and that would be where everyone can donate to. And so that is not just for parks improvements by any means, but I did sit in on it since as we seek donations and fundraising, that would be who houses it. So I want to be very knowledgeable of that, and we're making progress on that to be able to begin advertising to the fundraising campaign to elicit those donations for, I think we were kind of all in agreement on pickleball and the park for fundraising, and we're kind of good with those components. There was a bit more hesitation in terms of the hockey rink and things like that. There's some definite question marks surrounding that. My take on it is we have time to see how some of these what ifs pan out. And so just wanting to hear from you guys again, if you've given it any more thought, if we are wanting to bring this to the community, starting to try and get those fundraising things going, especially for pickleball in the playground, kind of seeing how things shake out with hockey rink sales tax. The funding source for the hockey rink is proposed as a local sales tax option. So I do have the information from the October meeting that Keegan can pull up if you guys have any specific questions on funding sources, components, but ultimately just looking for kind of consensus from the council to start bringing this forward, trying to get that fundraising campaign going.
Now, can that fly through? Will that be on the BLA CF when they design the webpage for fundraising? Would that be available there?
No, I don't believe so. I think we could probably embed it into our webpage and then have a link to their webpage.
And do you have any plans of having open houses to show that?
We do not have a very formal plan yet. I want to hear council's feedback before bringing it to the Parks Commission. Since I know back last spring, we had a very different methodology on how to proceed. So I want to hear from council first before bringing it to them, and then work out the details of a fundraising campaign and what that might look like. But yes, ultimately, I think there should be community engagement and things like that, and trying to find ways to show the video or how to go about that.
Mayor? Yep. Being cognizant to everything that we have in motion right now, primarily not just with the park, but also with this potential property acquisition on 371. I think there's some additional layers to this proverbial cake that we're gonna have to truly weigh before we start to get hasty and move forward. I know that there can be ramifications, or at least my perception would be that if we present this to the public to start fundraising for this project or phases of it, and a design change goes, then there could be public uproar based off of funding that's been allocated from private donors, and it's now changed for whatever reason. Um, Things that go through my mind after watching that and seeing the footprint, which is beautiful. And what are the odds that we end up getting chosen for that, right? If we secure the acreage that we're looking to secure on this new Mills property, we've discussed two principal projects with a hypothetical, and it's a big hypothetical with a lot of asterisks. Being placed there, an emergency services facility, which will house fire, police, and something pertaining to North Memorial, the helipad. I mean, there's been a lot of discussions and ideas about it. The second is city water. But going back to the emergency services facility, if that comes to fruition and we're able to get the land and we're able to get the funding for the project of this new build, what it'll come up to be as to what are we going to do with that city property right next door, which is conveniently next door to this park, which could, down the road, if we were to proceed forward with this park and we have that land available too, it may bring up some good questions. Well, maybe we could have redesigned this park to be a little bit more efficient somehow, not as packed together based off of what's provided right now. I have a little hesitation, and I hate to say it. I say it tongue in cheek because I know how much work you've put into this, but when opportunities present themselves, we all have to adapt and try to adhere to what we have coming through. And I think we're getting pretty close to the finish line on with the appraisals, with now soon negotiating on this land to trying to get good fair market price if we were to purchase it. Where I don't know how comfortable exactly I feel moving forward simultaneously with that land acquisition and the potential of the projects that could go there with doing this park at the same time, knowing that if we were to be a little bit more hesitant moving forward, that we could honestly have a different design, or we can go about having more land by removing that existing fire hall where it's at, which is a nice plot of land.
I know Public Works has said that they would be interested in utilizing the fire hall for parking of vehicles in the winter because it's limited now. But yes, I understand what you're saying there. My opinion is to go forward with the master plan as is with everything and start that, because we do have a lot of what ifs and that can throw a wrench in the works down the road. But some of those what ifs may not come to fruition, or if they do, it might be many years down the road.
And I guess my opinion on this is that what we've seen here is actually a very beautiful rendition of what it can be. And this is in the existing space that we have right now. Whether we get the new property or not, that would be for something else in my mind.
Yeah.
So this would be, and rather than worry about design changes or anything, my idea would be that we would specifically go after certain parts of this area first, start to advertise that. For example, I know there's a real want from people that I've heard for the pickleball courts. Why not start with that? And then you make that real first. That's the first step. Then we can go to the next step with the jungle gyms and for the children, right by the pickleball courts, the way it's shown on here. And that sort of ties together. I think it's all tied together very nicely. It sounds like the major issue would be how the skating rink will end up if we do it or not. And that would be what you mentioned, maybe a tax for a city tax or something like that. We don't know at this point. That's the one that's more probably the last portion. But if we were to advertise in steps like this, first the pickleball courts, then put in this area, this is what we'd like to do, people. Would you be willing to help us with this? Then we can get that in first, and then we'll work on the second stage. And then the final would be the ice rink area. That's sort of the way I would think to try to approach this, rather than all at once.
I might be wrong, but I think in October, didn't we come to consensus? That's kind of how we wanted to do it. Start with pickleball in the park. The
Yeah.
playground, I should say.
Yes.
Preceding me.
We never determined the exact phases, but we have talked about that in the past, and I would agree with all of you. I think that it would be a phase project because of what Jesse brought up. Another thing that I'd
Right.
throw out there too, that we're talking about is a new pickle building and how that impacts this area being connected,
Right.
you know, and how the pickle impacts it. But yeah, I would still go to the community, to the public about it, look at phasing. I personally think, the hockey rink, if we did inquire the other property, that would still be a better location for the hockey rink. There, no matter what we do with the park, if we put a hockey rink in there, there's no parking currently. And we're not gonna increase the parking to accommodate the capabilities of what that hockey rink will bring in. So we're already shooting ourselves in the foot there on the parking aspect, which we currently have an issue. So the hockey rink, no matter what,
Is left.
would be down on the list because for the
Mhm.
whole just parking aspect, the other property would serve that better. But in fairness to the community, we can still go ahead and present this as this is what we're doing, but if the hockey rink would move locations to be better, I don't see that as a downfall. But yeah, I would think the next steps before going to the public would be to identifying the phasing, the steps, and look at anytime you phase it out, it's gonna be more expensive than doing it all as a whole, but also making sure that in our phasing that we're doing it correctly, not on our wants, but on what the construction or land needs are. You know, would be my opinion to get some advice on that. And then to take into consideration what's gonna happen with the pickle and how that's gonna impact this. So I would definitely say yes, bring this to the public, but maybe, you know, have some more information to go along with it, you know?
Phase 1 is X, phase 2 is blah, phase
Yeah.
3 is there. And but yeah, you need to have the engineering look at it too, to make sure we don't mess up somewhere, that something's put somewhere in there, but I mean, that's gotta be done. Yes, but yeah. And I think Parks and Rec has kind of talked about phasing. So, I mean, they're under the understanding of phasing this in. And I think the council and the Parks and Rec Commission are on the same page with that phasing in, starting with pickleball's playground there, but yeah.
Yeah, I think Amber comes up with her wish list of what she wants, 1 through 10, and then see how that works with engineering and construction and which numbers drive, which numbers don't, and then create a list from there.
And
Well-
will that be discussed at the next Park and Rec meeting?
Yes, I don't have any information to present to them tomorrow night.
Right.
but
So
it's on the agenda.
So if anybody wants to come and sit and listen to that meeting, that might, in case there's extra questions.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really good points, like to Jesse's point, there are so many irons in the fire, like that building, and part of the reason we landed on this plan, it was kind of a mid-range plan in terms of price point
Mhm.
and not moving every aspect of the park and things like that. And, you know, if the fire hall were to move, then that's bonus space for parks and public works, or maybe some other amenity. If the hockey rink is ultimately not feasible, then we can pick something else to put in that location. With the pickleball and playground, the infrastructure is aging out. And so that's kind of where I'm at in a rock and a hard place here. Like, that's why we gotta try and get these balls rolling on some of this stuff if we're looking at funding it through donations. I may have my wish list, but if the money's not there,
Can't do it.
then that's like, my wish list only goes so far, and I can try to work within that and, you know, steer it towards certain areas. But if we're not doing anything until the donations are brought in, then that's the path.
Yeah, so from what I'm hearing, and I really appreciate you pushing this to us because without that, nothing would happen. And having it sounds to me like it'd just be even 2 phases. One would be, well, the pickleball courts, I'm sure we would get some donations for that. I think there's a high interest for that. The playground too, I don't see that as not being helpful. You know, I would think people would really like to have that there too. That could be one section right
Mhm.
there. That's phase one. The others are the new ball, the baseball or softball greens, as well as um, the ice rink. So that portion, the ice rink would probably be, the hockey rink would probably be down the road, and you can advertise it that way. We just want to do this right now. Help us with this. And I think if you start that, we would get some pretty good help with that, I think.
Can you remind me, Jenny, where does the revenue for spirits and pickle go again? Doesn't it just go back against the levy?
Well, they contribute to the city general budget. So a portion of their proceeds
It's-
every week.
It's a credit on the balance sheet?
Yep.
Got it.
Yep.
All right. I was in Detroit Lakes meeting with my bank this morning for my business, and I saw a headline on the Detroit Lakes newspaper, equal to the Brainerd Dispatch. Their municipal liquor store had 8.97 million in sales, and they had an exact 10% profit, $894,000.
Mhm.
Unbelievable amount of money.
Mhm.
You amortize revenues, projected revenues like that to just do a straight transfer of those funds instead of going back towards the budget. Pay for this. Adults' liquor habits in the city of Nisswa are paying for our kids' fun. Sounds great. I think there's a lot of ways to go about generating revenue. I'm just weary of releasing to the public, and all of us are gonna hear it, especially you. If we release this plan and there is a change, hypothetically, we get the land over on Mills property, we put a new emergency services facility there. Say just hypothetically, we don't reutilize that building and we tear that down, and it's available for park expansion for additional infrastructure. There's a lot of what ifs,
Mhm.
but there's, I think, a good opportunity now right now, the rest of this quarter, especially seeing how this land's gonna shake out, to see if we can put some of these dominoes closer together so we can flick them all down at one time. I would feel personally more comfortable going about that rather than just throwing it out to the public and starting to get funds, as much as I would love to throw that out there and start getting funds. When we tell them we're gonna build this and all of a sudden we say we're not, or it's modified at all.
So I was just gonna ask a question as far as, let's utilize pickleball as an example. If we think conceptually 6 courts and a tennis court is what we're looking to do,
Sure.
whether it's exactly there
Yep.
in that location on the park or not, this is the amenity we're looking to build is,
Sure.
it might be a way to just try to describe
Absolutely.
it.
In respect to everybody's, I think, consensus here is a phase. I think that's great. Absolutely. I did have a question in regards to the rink. Can the rink accommodate pickleball courts in the off season? Because obviously you're talking about 2 separate off-season amenities, pickleball only being able to be utilized in certain months, likewise the hockey rink. Can that space be dual utilized?
You can, I believe right now we have 2 pickleball courts in our hockey rink. I believe Brainerd put 5 into their hockey rink. So the potential's there. It does come with its own preferences.
Understood.
Now, the other question I have is, say like, we go ahead into the public and we find out nobody wants to donate. We got some people who did donate, okay? But it's way insufficient. We just can't do it. Sorry, we're gonna stop. What happens to the money? Do we just return it? What happens to that? I don't know.
That's all set up with the community giving site. Correct
Yeah.
me If I'm wrong, they take care of all that.
They can like put a note, to my understanding, they can put a note in there if it's to a specific area, but ultimately I believe it's the Nisswa Enrichment Fund. And correct me if I'm wrong.
So this one.
Yeah, agreed.
Yep.
Okay.
One other question with that, you had mentioned sales tax. What was the sales tax, or what are you talking about with sales tax?
That's actually gonna be is that gonna be on the ballot this upcoming November? For Nisswa residents to vote on?
No, so we were about
Oh,
a year
that's right.
ago talking about utilizing that as an option to generate revenue to request from the legislature to implement a local sales tax. Currently, there's a moratorium that will likely be in effect through 2025. But that is a lever that potentially, cities will have again to be able to generate revenues for a purpose like this.
Right. I forgot about that moratorium, which is what made me start to think about the liquor revenue from both spirits and pickle. If that can be used as a fundraising lever for a project such as this, I think the community would applaud a reinvestment from such proceeds to see that type of infrastructure be built. And then we can more or less allocate what we think we need. And
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we've talked to both Pickle and Spirits about kind of a roundup campaign as you check out, or a specific dollar amount and get, something up on the wall kind of thing. And they're both willing to help parks in that way. Just trying to make sure that that could be a mechanism as well. As part of why that flyer was created, a little visual representation that they could have as they ask people. Nothing's for certain, just another idea, and bringing it forward and advertising and trying to make the project known. And I think like any construction project, there will be changes, and it's hard to communicate that, and you get your heart set on something, and
right.
it is tough.
I'm in consensus with these guys to start marketing it in respect to the phases as it's more or less already been discussed.
You have multiple renderings of this still, correct?
Yes.
Right? So in your initial marketing too, it's never bad, in my opinion, to throw out multiple renderings just to let the public know that we're not sure exactly how it's gonna land too. That helps the perception on this is exactly what it's gonna be when they're kind of looking at 2 or 3 similar options.
Sure.
At least to initially put it out there. It kind of helps curve the expectation,
Fine with me. Fine with me. Okay,
We're all in agreement.
Does that help you?
It's a matter of
Yeah.
because,
letting her then run. with
yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, we're really gonna have, our proverbial cataract will be removed in, a few weeks to month if we are able to get some good idea as to what this land acquisition is gonna look like. And, if, that's a big investment.
Yeah, we'll spend the next couple of months with the Parks Commission trying to devise a more fine-tuned plan, and hopefully be ready to hit the summer season, and that should hopefully buy some more time to answer some questions.
And we're having a liquor committee meeting, first one of the year, on Monday at 11 a.m. Yeah, to discuss a multitude of things, the pickle and its rendering, remodeling, new pickle. Yeah, so that can play a part in it too, is to see how what we all can come to a consensus on. And there's just so much in a small proximity. It's just,
The community center parking lot's also under consideration for the 2025 road bond as well, which plays a
2025.
role in
road bond, yeah.
in some of the park planning.
Yeah.
So lots of things to
Yes,
consider.
It'll be a busy year.
Be very busy.
And I appreciate all the work you've done for this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Done a great
been
job.
stressful for you, I know, and the committee.
It's the fun
but-
part.
Yeah, but I know at times you've probably felt being pulled apart and not getting
No,
much
it's not-
feedback,
I
so.
appreciate that. It's certainly a lot to digest for everybody, and trying to come up with a plan. It's not too often we do this, so.
Yeah, it'd be probably a lot easier if we weren't looking to build an Empire State Building behind Holiday Gas Station.
That's just
Joking.
one consideration. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Mayor.
you.
Is there anything else? That's the agenda. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn for tonight.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And adjourn.